Good evening and a very warm welcome indeed to you on a chilly Hillingdon lockdown evening. I hope that wherever you are, you're keeping the chills at bay. My name is Martin Hall. I'm head of ACS International School in Hillingdon, London, and we're looking forward to a fascinating evening with a couple of really inspiring speakers talking and answering questions about a topic that touches on one of the values that's right at the core of the ACS group of international schools, the idea of global citizenship and what that means in practice. This is part of a series of webinars entitled The World Needs, and I'm thrilled that ACS Hillingdon has the opportunity to host this particular topic. A couple of years ago, we were reviewing our school and feeling a little bit dissatisfied with the ways in which we were motivating and providing structure to students' broader learning, thinking here not only about their academics, but also their learning about other skills and dispositions that we consider to be vital for our students to learn. And that prompted us to look around for good practice that we could learn from. And we eventually settled on the Global Citizen Diploma that you're going to hear more about this evening. You're also going to hear about some of the other aspects of global citizenship, some of the challenges to this way of thinking, but also to the power of advocacy and global responsibility. We have 3 speakers in total, and there will be a chance after each one for you to ask questions using the Q&A feature. I have some help behind the scenes here to help field those questions, so please don't be shy about sharing your comments and questions, and we'll do our very best to address them. But now, with a great deal of pleasure and considerable pride, I'd like to welcome Sarah Kebbell, one of our final year students who exemplifies what we understand by global citizenship and embodies what we aspire for our students to show. Up to now, Sarah has lived in New Zealand and Belgium, as well as the UK. And like many final year students in this year of great uncertainty, Sarah is keeping her options a little bit open about what she'll be doing next year, but I understand that she plans to return to New Zealand and that studying food science, economics, or health science are among the options she's focusing on at present. Sarah's a high-achieving student in the classroom and a truly outstanding long-distance runner. Sarah, I'm not sure how you fit it all in, but I'm delighted that you do. Welcome to you, and now over to you, Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. I am Sarah Kebbell, a grade 12 student at ACS Hillingdon, and I'm currently pursuing the Global Citizen Diploma, also known as GCD. And I'm also part of the GCD committee. As a committee member, I have helped inform and support fellow students to complete unique qualifications that go beyond the academic results, to acknowledge all the exceptional citizenship and service-related activities that they have undertaken to become global citizens. Being a global citizen involves being a person who conducts their daily life with a commitment to understanding and helping others. It consists of someone being aware of and understanding the wider world and how their decisions impact themselves and the world around them. Moreover, it involves reflecting on their values and beliefs and deciding what is important to them. We live in a world where there is fast-growing interconnectedness between people, cultures, countries, and economies, meaning that there is a global dimension to everyone and how we define ourselves. If we are all interconnected in one way or another, the most important way of responding to this is to pursue the path of becoming a global citizen. We must learn to adapt to the new way of life. If we decide to keep staying as citizens of the past, and if we do not learn to adapt or to respond, we will get left behind and miss out on specific opportunities. To support the students at ACS Hillingdon in responding to becoming a global citizen, this is where the Global Citizens Diploma comes into play. There are 16 elements in the GCD, though you don't need to complete all of them. It is by completing a particular combination and a certain number of the elements, along with a written, visual, or oral reflection as evidence, you can earn the different levels of the GCD, either the GCD certificate, GCD diploma, or GCD diploma with distinction. As students pursue the GCD, there are 4 fundamental core values that all students must achieve to receive the certificate level: academics, community engagement, global understanding, and intercultural communication. Academics, though one might not assume as first, is vital to becoming a global citizen. All students at ACS schools have been exposed to a school environment that is encouraging, supporting, and challenging. All students at ACS schools are exposed and encouraged to participate in a wide range of subjects before even leaving high school. This has allowed students to make informed decisions inside and outside the classroom, where they are aware of the wider world and how their choices impact themselves and the world around them. I can personally express how the encouragement to pursue a wide range of subjects has offered and benefited me in becoming a global citizen. Before moving to London and attending ACS Hillingdon, I attended a high school in New Zealand where I was planning to do NCEA, the National Certificate Education Achievement. Pursuing this qualification in Year 11, which is equivalent to Grade 10, most schools would require you to do math and English. But once you reach Year 12 and 13, which is equivalent to grades 12 and 11, there were no compulsory subjects. Back in New Zealand, I would have never thought about carrying on with studying English or studying maths to such a high standard as I am now. For a lot of my education, I have found the subject English a very challenging subject. And because of this, I would have not chosen to continue studying. Though at ACS, I was encouraged to keep the subject. As a result of keeping English and reading the prescribed texts, I've been exposed and educated to a lot of history and significant events in the world that I would never have been exposed to otherwise. Additionally, pursuing math to such a high standard than I thought I was capable of has also enhanced my opportunities once I leave high school. As Mr. Hall mentioned, I have not completely decided what I want to do after school, though I have always had a passion for food, and have recently decided that I may want to go on and study food science and technology at Massey University in New Zealand. Though, in order to do this qualification, you do need to have a high level of math. And thanks to ACS and the push and encouragement to pursue a wide range of subjects, I have now been allowed to do so. Therefore, it is clear that the broad range of subjects has opened my eyes to the world around me, rather than keeping me narrow-minded to what is in front of me or what I thought I was capable of. It has also opened doors to many opportunities in life that I would have never been able to achieve otherwise. Another key element many students at ACS Hillingdon have achieved is community engagement. Many students at ACS have helped in their local community. They have met people from different backgrounds, engaged and educated the youth about their health, or supported the elderly and the vulnerable. Engaging in community engagement has allowed students to conduct their daily lives with a commitment to understanding and helping others, though ultimately it has also allowed them to grow in new ways, gain new perspectives on life, and understand how their decisions impact themselves and the world around them. They are becoming a global citizen. I am proud to say that I have also achieved the community engagement element. For a couple of months last year, in the weekends, I was helping out at my local city harvest, where I was sorting out and redistributing food waste to get it to the people who are not as privileged to afford it. During volunteering, I met people I would have never met otherwise, who were so dedicated to helping others that their passion fell onto me. Although I am no longer volunteering at City Harvest due to the current situation, my commitment to helping others meant that I wanted to continue helping my community during this time of need, and I decided to become an NHS volunteer supporter. As an NHS volunteer, I have done the grocery shopping for the vulnerable individuals, making their lives slightly less stressful during this pandemic. Though I do have to admit that being a student and filling in volunteering is not always on my priority list. Though each errand usually lasts about an hour, which in the scheme of things is not much time. The fulfillment I have got from volunteering and the benefits that are given to the community last much longer than the time spent volunteering. Volunteering has helped shift my focus from purely myself, my family, friends, and school and sport to a more global approach. It has made me appreciate my opportunities a lot more. It has allowed me to gain a new perspective on life and realize how my actions impact the wider community. The elements mentioned are only a glimpse into what is offered due to pursuing the GCD as a result of attending an international school. Many students have great incentives to get involved with extracurriculars, but usually find the motivation or the time a considerable obstacle. I initially, as stated earlier, found some of the elements more of a struggle to achieve, though I have found that the GCD creates a substantial incentive for the students to get involved with their communities, shift their perspective on life, and reflect on their experiences. Not only do students get the physical and mental benefits from achieving the elements, but the GCD also acts as a place where the students can collect their achievements and store them in a safe place where they are easily accessible. These students who pursue the GCD leave school not only with good grades and education, but with evidence of the experiences and opportunities that make them different from everyone else, making them stand out in the crowd in university or job applications. However, the benefits of the GCD extend further than making a student stand out of the crowd. The GCD has also allowed them to develop a greater understanding and appreciation of their experiences that others may have not been so privileged to have access, making them more sympathetic to others and the world around them. Though pursuing the GCD helps students on becoming a global citizen, there are a lot of other benefits that students gain from attending an international school that also aids them in becoming a global citizen without them even realizing. An individual's perspective on the world is usually shaped by the societal norms and experiences that they have had throughout their life. Though attending an international school like ACS Hillingdon, there are students from all over the world with different social and cultural backgrounds, where the students are exposed to new cultures that help expand their values on the world, away from the familiar comforts of home. Being exposed to different cultures allows students to see life from different perspectives and gain their views on the world. Ultimately, exposure to different backgrounds gives them the ability to improve their social and communication skills on an international scale, which is vital to being a global citizen. Though attending international school also allows students to become a global citizen in the experiences that international schools provide to the students, they also aid them into becoming global citizens. One, being sports. Being part of a sports team allows students to learn the importance of communication and collaboration to succeed. However, as a result of pursuing the sport at an international school, the travel and competition abroad further aids in students' global citizenship, where they learn to adapt to new cultures and make friends abroad. Ultimately, all these experiences that students at ACS and international schools and myself have gained from pursuing the GCD, as well as just attending an international school, has made students internationally minded, more culturally aware, so that students can work in harmony with peers from all around the world, learn from each other, and learn about different perspectives. It also has helped promote empathy and compassion, all of which are vital parts of being global citizens and leading into a positive future. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask or put them in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Sarah. We do have a question. What first attracted you to take the GCD?
Well, personally, I've always strived to work hard in my academics, and sometimes I think that's what I purely only focus on, and I wanted just not to make academics define me, and I wanted to make sure that I still enjoyed other hobbies like sport, and I still helped out in my community. So when I found out that the GCD was joining our school, I was really keen to take part in it.
Amazing, thank you. What was the most difficult thing about changing school systems?
Definitely, I would say the changing school systems I didn't find too difficult, but I found just moving away from friends who I lived in New Zealand for about 10 years, and I lived in Belgium for about 4.5 years. So most of my friends were in New Zealand. So the hardest thing I found was just adapting, making friends again after being back in New Zealand and having really close friends for 10 years. But I found that the international school was really supportive in regards to making sure that I was on a level that made me be able to learn in the classroom at a good level. So I didn't feel like I was deprived of any education.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll now hand back over to Martin.
Thanks very much indeed, Sarah. That was really fascinating. I loved the way that you talked there about adaptability, and I guess in so many different ways showed that as well in the things that you were referring to. We're going to move on now to our second speaker, and it's truly an honor to welcome Michael Sheldrick to the webinar. Michael is Chief Policy and Government Affairs Officer at Global Citizen, an international advocacy group providing a platform for young people to hold governments accountable for delivering the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Michael has worked on a number of successful global advocacy campaigns with Global Citizen to generate support and action towards ending extreme poverty. And he's going to share with us what a successful advocacy campaign looks like and what he thinks it means to be a global citizen. Besides his work with Global Citizen, Michael is a regular speaker and a prolific writer, contributing to The Guardian, Huffington Post, The Diplomatic Courier, The Diplomat Magazine, and Forbes.com, among others. Michael, we're absolutely delighted that you can join us. And now over to you.
I couldn't be more thrilled to join you. I think it's amazing that a school's taken this initiative, looking at how they can embed global citizenship. You know, I didn't have any of that when I was at school, when I finished high school just a decade and a half ago. You know, most of our work, if we had any opportunities to volunteer, it was all very local in the world's most remote city in the world. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about how, therefore, a kid from the most isolated city in the world ended up co-founding this movement called Global Citizen, looking to end extreme poverty around the world. One of my best friends from university used to say, Michael, it's not what people do or how they do it which really makes them interesting. It's why they do it. Why do you care? Why are you here? And so I guess I wanted to begin by just talking you through my why, how I ended up getting involved in Global Citizen. And really, it took me a while to actually realize this answer. You know, some years ago, as a 12-year-old kid, I was fortunate enough with my parents, who are both British, and we were moving from the UK to Australia. I was fortunate to visit the pyramids of Giza, sorry. And years later, when I finished university, I was fortunate to visit them again with one of my best friends, and which is very special. And you know, most people are lucky to visit them once in a lifetime, let alone twice. And I remember as we were looking out at them, my friend said to me, he said, "In what ways do you think you're different from the last time you came here a decade ago?" And at first I wasn't sure. He was quick to point out that maybe around the waist I had more than certainly as a 12-year-old kid, and that much was probably true. But the other point I thought of was, well, I actually remember what it was like as that 12-year-old kid. I was just on the cusp of starting high school. I did primary school in the UK, and then in high school started all of that in Australia. And I was this very shy kid when I think back to what I was starting school. And I was shy for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons was because I had a slight speech impediment. Certain words I couldn't pronounce, went to speech pathologist, but you know, my THs struggled with, 3 became 3, like, you know, instances like that. And kids can be very cute and nice. They can also be very cruel. And so, you know, coming to Australia, you know, quite quickly in that first year, you know, I was teased. In the process of getting teased, that tends to have a knock-on effect on all your other areas of life. I remember playing Australian football rules for the first time. And you know, they have like an oval shaped ball, and I remember going to kick the ball to score a goal. And I remember just thinking, look, just let this be an ordinary miss. I don't have to score a goal. I just want this to be an ordinary, like at least almost in something that is just something that a regular kid would do. And somehow, maybe it was because I was overthinking it, I would kick the ball and it would fly up and behind my head, and everyone would be laughing. And then of course, you know, my grades as well. I remember going in with my teacher at the end of the first term, and the teacher writing out where all the kids were ranked and said, you know, this is the average, this is the top, and Michael's down here, and basically suggested that, look, Michael's not even like looking like he's going to finish high school, let alone get into college, university, and all these other things. And, someone years later said, did that have an impact on you? And I remember thinking, not really. Again, my same best friend who told me about what makes people interested in is why. I remember him saying, look, sometimes, Michael, people tend to set such low expectations of you that rather than rising above them, you tend to often live down to those expectations. And so I just shrugged my shoulders, didn't think much of it until this one day. I went into school and, I might be shown that, it was maybe almost 2 decades ago now since I started high school. But I remember doing this in-class assignment, and it was on this movie called Gladiator, with Russell Crowe, which some of you parents would certainly know of. And I remember just doing this assignment, walking out, not thinking anything more of it. And when I got home, my mum had this confused look on her face, and she said, there's a message on the answer machine, and played it. And it was my teacher, Mr. Byrne, himself, 24 at the time, first teaching gig. And he said, hi, Mrs. Sheldrick, I want to give you a call back. I've noticed a change about Michael. And I thought, that's a slightly odd, kind of creepy message. What have I done wrong? And turns out when my mum rang him, he had said that somehow I had they had no idea, but topped the class and the year group, and they wanted to know if I had somehow cheated or something. And when I came in the next day, the teacher said, look, in all seriousness, there could be more to you than meets the eye here. Like, have you ever thought about actually trying? And I think it was the first time in my life that someone had actually said something like that to me. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, heck, what have I got to lose? And so I came in every day after school, worked with him. He would push me, challenge me. And the second last day of school, I was on my couch at home and looking at the driveway, and Mr. Byrne pulled in, came down the driveway, and I opened the door, and I was like, what are you doing here, Mr. Byrne? Come into my house. And he gave me this certificate, which my mum still has to this day, with a number 1 on it. And he said, congratulations, mate. You've done it. And, I share that story because, for me, years later, I would eventually finish in the top 1% of our state. I would get into university. I would get into law school. Suddenly people were telling me, oh, Michael, you're so smart. You can do anything. But in some ways, I never forgot what it was like to be that kid at the start of high school, who everyone thought was a loser, lazy, slow, what else. And I never forgot the difference that Mr. Byrne made in my life. And as I was finishing high school, and there's a theme here, and I'm not just saying this because this is with a bunch of teachers on the call, I say this to everyone, but it was at the end of school, another teacher who had a formidable impact on my life said to me, look, you can believe the hype in what everyone's saying, go on and earn a lot of money, or do what you're passionate about, and who knows, you might make a difference along the way. And it was first through him who I started to learn about the world. It wasn't in a structured curriculum, and not anything like what is happening at this school community, but he would tell us things about, what was going on in the world, how others were living. And I just thought, gee, I so lucky to have this great teacher, this great school, and I was ranked one of the bottom in the class, and look at the impact. But there must be students around the world who, maybe it's because they don't have great teachers like Mr. Byrne, or maybe it's because they don't have access to a cheap polio vaccine that only costs 13 cents and they die before their 5th birthday. let alone get into school. You know, for whatever their reason, you know, all of these kids probably far more smarter, intelligent, hardworking than I am, but because they don't have access to the same opportunities, will never realize their potential. And it was really that burning desire that when I went into university made me realize, you know, it's that injustice that I want to dedicate my life to, and I want to support, and I want to do something about. Now here's the thing, and so I knew what I wanted to support, I didn't know how. And this is where enters another great mentor in my life, this man here, Mr. Wei Su, who was, when I entered university, they partnered me with this older mentor. And, you know, so all of you students about to graduate, definitely university has mentoring programs, almost as important as anything you might study. But Wei, in his own way, was a lawyer, had ditched the law. He had the opportunity to start what would become Global Citizen. It was called Global Poverty Project. The original idea behind it was, let's do a 90-minute presentation, take this out to schools, faith groups, community groups, to educate them about the Millennium Development Goals, which was before the Sustainable Development Goals. And it was what all countries had agreed to in 2000, to halve the number of people living in extreme poverty by 2015. And the belief was, you know, if we provided people with the information, a way to get involved, you know, change might follow. And so Wei had asked his work, one of the largest firms in the world, if they would let him, they would let him work part-time so he could start this. And they had said, no, we don't allow you to do that. So in an act of bravery, I think, kind of said, well, I'm going to leave and volunteer. And that's when Wei came to me one day as I was close to finishing university. He took me out for pizza around the time this photo was taken. And he said, what are you going to do with your life? And I thought, gee, I don't know, finish law school, but try and do pro bono work on the way. And he said, you can do that, or I've got a better idea. And then he said to me, what do you know about polio eradication? And polio, for those that don't know or might be too young to remember, polio was this debilitating disease which during the middle of the 20th century had left tens of thousands of children mainly paralyzed, in many cases maimed, in some cases dead, until a vaccine came along in the 50s. And this vaccine had really eradicated polio in all of the developed countries in the world. Indeed, in Australia, the last case was the early 70s. And then in the year I was born, 1988, everyone decided, the World Health Community said, look, we should eradicate this everywhere because it still exists in 125 countries. And so in 1988, they came together with the goal of eradicating polio around the world. And for many people, they actually think polio has already been eradicated. And I said that to Wei, and he said, almost, but not quite. It remains in 4 countries: Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Nigeria. And, you know, in these 4 countries, at the time, it was still around 1,000 cases a year. And I said, what's this? How's this relate to poverty? What are you trying to do? And he said, look, I realized by taking this presentation on the road, by going out talking about ending poverty and all the barriers, it's too much. People can't cope. You need to bring it down to something that could inspire them and make really tangible and concrete. If we can make polio just the second human disease in history to be eradicated after smallpox, you know, then what a triumph that would be. That might inspire people and say, you know, it's possible to do all these other things as well, including end extreme poverty. And again, I said, well, Wei, what's this got to do with me? And he said, well, Rotary International, they've eradicated it in 99.9% of the world. But the issue is there's this financial gap that's needed. At the time, around $500 million was still needed to eradicate this around the world. Again, I was saying $500 million, like, come on, like, you're talking to someone who's 22 here. Like, what are you hoping me to do? That sounds a lot more than any quiz night or charity night, gala or movie night is going to be able to raise. And he said, well, I'm not asking you to do any of that. And then he pointed out later that year in Perth, the Queen actually was gathering all the leaders of the Commonwealth around the table. And for those who have watched The Crown or any of those things, you know that this is about 50 world leaders, and it was coming to Perth. It was the biggest thing that had ever happened in Perth, probably ever will do. And he said, what about putting this on the agenda of this summit? And I thought, what do you mean putting that on the agenda of his summit? And he said, well, the first time the Queen came to Perth in the 50s, there was actually a big polio endemic and she had to stay in a boat, right? So how fitting this last summit if they made this the turning point. Secondly, of the 4 countries where polio was endemic, 3 of them were Commonwealth countries. So he said, you know, this could be that moment. And he said, and what the heck, usually these summits are a talk fest, they don't achieve anything. They're probably looking for something to show progress. And so I noodled on this, I thought about it, and then in the end I said, okay, I'll do it. And then that's where he said to me, look, I've got no budget, I can pay you a meager salary, but you have my full moral support. And so I thought, great. But I went off and this was one of the first lessons I simply decided to ask. I wrote a letter. It was addressed to Julia Gillard, who was then the first Prime Minister of Australia. And when I sent that off, I wasn't expecting a response. I just did it because I was like, at least let me get my pitch down. And then in the meantime, I realized I needed to learn and find more about polio because I needed to be able to tell the Prime Minister if I got the meeting what this actually meant. And that's what led me to Rotary International and this man here in the center, David Goldstone, who had founded the largest Rotary club in Perth. And I met with David and he was like, I'm confused why you want to listen to me, but if you want to know about polio, let me tell you a story about one of my best friends. And so he told me this story about one of his best friends, John, in the 60s in Sydney. And he told me how John was a great runner and one day was running down the terrace in the center of Sydney and just collapsed. And John woke up in a hospital bed and in front of him was the chief medical officer who said to him, you will never walk again. And David told me how his friend John said, yes, I will. And painfully and slowly, you know, he couldn't walk originally from the waist down, but he, you know, recovered the use of his legs. He never recovered fully. He could pick up his kids maybe when they asked him, but with great difficulty. He told me about how he had a caliper on one of his legs and how his friend John always had a limp. But he said, here's the thing, John never forgot what it was like and was just committed to eradicating this disease everywhere. And he raised $100,000 in fundraising across the country. And I thought that was a great story. And I said, well, is John, can I meet him? Can I speak to him? And suddenly there was a tear in David's eyes. And he had said to me, yeah, sorry, it's just so hard to talk about. And suddenly he pulled out the chair next to me, put his leg on it, lifted up his trouser leg, and there was a caliper. And David said, it wasn't John who collapsed all those years ago, it was me. It was just so hard to talk about that I have to make up someone because it was such pain that I went through, and I don't want anyone's pity. I just want to eradicate this once and for all. And if you think you can do that, I'm sick of committees, I'm sick of promises, but you have my full support. And so it was literally the same week as that meeting that I was at university getting ready to go to a lesson in the morning that I got a call from a block number. And this is a lesson too. Sometimes block numbers, you never know what you're going to get. It's not always a telemarketer. And they said, this is the Prime Minister's office. And I thought, what? And I thought it was a joke because my friends all knew I was trying to get in touch with her. But believe it or not, I wasn't. And they said, we've got your letter. the Prime Minister's going to be in Perth next month and would love 15 minutes with you to discuss your letter. And so lo and behold, shortly after that, in a high school, again, another theme, in the staff room of this ordinary suburban high school in Perth, Western Australia, I met with our first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. And believe it or not, it's almost 10 years to the day that this meeting happened, early March 2011. But it was a meeting I'll never forget, and also never forget her reaction. I sat down, I was so nervous, and I thanked her for taking the time to meet with me. And she said, well, Michael, I'm on my third shot of Red Bull for the evening. So if you please, can you get on and tell me what this is all about? And so I just launched straight into it. I told her about why this would be a great idea, why she should be doing this. I told her about David's story. I told her all these things. And then at the end of it, she just sat there, and I'll never forget. And I think it's testament to her credit as a leader that she would give this student the time of day as if I was the most important person in the country at that point, which I was far from being. And she just looked me in the eyes, didn't interrupt, and was very measured. And then when I had finished talking, she said, I very much like this idea. I want to do something about it, but I need your help. And I thought, what do you mean you need my help? Yeah, Prime Minister, like, my job is done. I've given you the idea. Now you can go and do it. And she said, no, she said, at the end of the day, you can't blame the politicians, because I need permission to spend what is in the end your money. And that's where I came up with this idea. I said, well, what about, I was like, she needs like a public spectacle. She needs permission. What about a concert? And so I said that out loud, and she said, yeah, that's great. Do it the night before, make it the biggest thing in town, bring all these young people together, because I don't want this to be a summit of the Queen and all these stuffy world leaders. I want young people involved. If you can do that, that's perfect. And then, you know, we can launch this together. And so I walked out there, and I rang Way, and he said, how did it go? I said, oh, yeah, it's great. Only one little thing. I may have committed us to do a concert. And he said, no, not we, you. You committed yourself to do it now. And, you know, sometimes I think when you declare these ideas, the universe just has a funny way of responding. And that's why I tell people, if you can get the clarity of outcome down and ask people for help, you'll never be surprised. Because within weeks of that, we were forwarded this email from a friend who had married an Australian. She was an American, and she had organized one of the biggest charity concerts in America. And she was going to right into all the big NGOs, asking them for a job. And none of them had a job, but one of these NGOs had spoken to us. We weren't even big enough that she didn't even heard of us, that they forwarded us her resume. And I remember I had a call with her, trying to convince her whether she would run this concert for us. And she saw right through my pitch. She was like, how many artists and singers have you got on board? And I was like, oh, well, really interesting. We're talking to this local band. We're doing this. And she was like, so in other words, 0. How much sponsorship have you got? Oh, well, the Indian down the road has agreed to give free meal and takeaway to volunteers working. You know, we've got this in kind. No, how much money have you actually got? Nothing. And then she was like, have you even got enough to pay me? To which the answer was not really. And she gave us a call back a few days later, and she said, do you really think that if you pull this off, the Prime Minister will respond? And I was like, I have to believe that she gave us her word. And sure enough, she said, well, I've got in some other offers, but there's something about this idea that is quite powerful, and we can figure out pay and all of that later. I want to help you make this work. And I'm cutting a long story short, because there was a lot that happened. But 6 months later, we managed to convince somehow John Legend, 9-time Grammy Award winning artist, to fly from all the way from America to this small city in the remote corner of the world, Perth, Australia. He spent more time flying there and back than he was actually in the city. And we had this End of Polio concert. And I'll never forget the next day when the Prime Minister invited us all to this press conference. We had David Cameron, Bill Gates was the Prime Minister of Canada, Pakistan, Nigeria, and she announced over $100 million. And David, who sadly has since passed away, he passed away 4 years ago now, though I have a lifelong relationship with his wife and his daughter. They're like family to me. But I remember he was standing next to me, and she gave us a front row seat with these polio survivors as she made this announcement. And she made it clear it was that story of solidarity that moved her to act. And off the back of that commitment, I honestly thought I would finish law school. I'd gone part-time at this point, and I thought I would finish it off and go back to normal life. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation got wind of this. They gave us our first 3-year grant from 2012 to 2015 to bring this to America and globally. In 2015, we decided, well, we're not done yet. We're going to commit to the UN Sustainable Development Goals through to the end of the 2030. Chris Martin from Coldplay came on board and agreed to take this festival globally to a different city each year. We've taken it to India, South Africa for the centenary of Nelson Mandela, to Germany, all around the world. And in total, we've seen over the last decade almost $50 billion worth of commitments announced, 880 million lives impacted as a result, and over 25 million actions taken by citizens around the world. Last year, we pivoted. We worked with Lady Gaga on the One World Together at Home that was shown in the UK on the BBC, and came together in a matter of 3 weeks and ended up being our most viewed event, with 300 million people watching around the world. It won the Guinness Book of Record for the most amount of reach in support of community health workers. We followed that up with a push to make sure that the vaccine, and for me, it came full circle, the story of polio and having to wait decades for the rest of the world to get a vaccine. And my firm belief, we can't let that happen with regards to COVID-19. And of course, just in a few weeks' time, we'll be launching our 5-point recovery plan for the world to end the pandemic for everyone, avoid a hunger crisis, get every kid back in school, and not just those that can afford online learning, reboot action on climate change, and safeguard the most vulnerable. And with that, I know I've probably gone over, so I'm going to pause it there and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Michael, for that really engaging talk. Really inspiring. And we've just got a few questions which we'll go through quickly. So what key quality did you need to draw on to keep you self-motivated throughout all of your journey?
I think, honestly, I would say it was the different people I met like along the way. One thing I was always conscious of is I didn't know how to do any of this. One thing I should have said is I had never organized many events before. I had organized one event at university, a hot dog stand, and it was so pitiful that the small people that came along quickly walked away in the other direction. So I would say it was the people who really leapt onto the idea and decided to support us. And from prime ministers down to security guards, through to people willing to give their time, like Lindsay, the producer I mentioned, to incredible mentors like David Goldstone.
So how can people get involved with the new project of global citizenship?
So we have an app, Global Citizen, which you can download, or you can go to globalcitizen.org. We have a lot of information at the moment. We've been pushing out a lot on, what's involved in getting the vaccine, how to get this out. We did a lot last year early on in the pandemic around social distancing. There's quizzes, there's things that you can call on your government. But also, we've got this element now where you can earn points for your volunteering your time, and you can trade in those points to earn rewards. Originally, those rewards were in-person events. We had artists giving them tickets to all their shows, but now we've got all these other experiences that are online, not just in the music industry, but we're partnering, to expand that across to fit people's different areas of interests. But essentially, become a global citizen. Sign up at globalcitizen.org and use your voice. And you don't have to do it just to us. I think one of the most powerful things is we each have a voice. We all have a local member of parliament. They need to hear from us. The UK has been one of the most effective in the world in rolling out a vaccine really fast, and we need to make sure that everyone everywhere also gets access to them. Otherwise, we'll be facing another deeper crisis. So yeah, you've all got a voice, and don't be afraid to use it.
Sick. And just really quickly, what advice would you give to young people who think that they can't make a difference in the world?
Yeah, I would, for me, I never set out I never thought I'd be living in New York, doing what I'm doing now. I think it's when someone believes in you and gives you an opportunity like Mr. Byrne, I would respond to it by taking that offer for help. You don't have to do this by yourself. I think if Mr. Byrne had just said, look, there's more to you than meets the eye, and I had, tried doing it by myself, I would have failed. And so when people believe in you, don't be afraid to also ask them for help and say, look, whichever way, and I can extrapolate it to doing that first concert, all points across the journey, but don't be afraid to follow up their belief in you with and ask for help, because what I've found is when people believe in you, they're almost waiting for you to ask for help, and don't be shy of that.
Thanks so much, Michael. That's really insightful. I'm just going to hand back over to Martin, who will share his perspective on what it means to be a global citizen.
Thanks so much for that. Michael, what an incredibly inspiring talk. I'm just full of awe about what you've managed to do through determination and resilience and your care for others. And of course, as an educationalist, I am both horrified and inspired by the stories of your own schooling and the way in which Mr. Byrne in turn inspired you. I'd like to share with you now just a few of my own thoughts on global citizenship and how I see it affecting our young people at school. I'd also like, if there's time, to explore just for a few minutes some of the challenges to global citizenship and the opportunities facing us. When I reflect on my own understanding of global citizenship, I find myself thinking right back to my own upbringing in Northeast Scotland, in a city that I felt at the time would have rivaled Michael's claim to the most isolated city in the world, because that's what it felt like as a rather moody teenager. I had a Scottish mum, an English dad, and no immediate prospect of experiencing the world beyond. But there was also, though, I realize now, a real sense of curiosity, born more than anything out of being part of a family household that liked to talk about serious stuff, and a house that was jam-packed with books. The first chance that I had, following a couple of months of holiday work while at university, I bought a train ticket that took me from Aberdeen to Marrakesh, followed up a little bit later on with a couple of years of volunteering on the Indian Ocean coast of Tanzania and other work abroad. There have been so many adventures along the way, any number of horrible, hair-raising and embarrassing moments, but also the enduring bug of exploring and finding out more about the world. And a few decades on, my family here has its international side, quite a few years of us living overseas in Europe and East Africa, and a load of friends from all over the world. And I hope that some of that curiosity and hunger to experience the world has rubbed off just a little bit on my own kids and maybe even on other people's kids in the form of the students I work with at school. The concept of global citizenship, though, is not all about travel, and I don't think it requires a load of adventure, although that can certainly be a lot of fun. For me personally, global citizenship springs simply from two things: curiosity about the world and a sense of responsibility towards others. And unpacking that a little bit, I see global citizenship for our students as involving a sense of open-mindedness and adaptability, a willingness to communicate in someone else's language, and courage in facing unfamiliar and sometimes scary ideas and situations. Global citizenship involves identifying big questions and problems and focusing on building bridges between people rather than amplifying divisions. And that's not a matter of some sort of vague kumbaya feeling towards the world. And it's definitely not about moral neutrality towards wrongdoing in the world. But it is about pragmatism and basic life smarts. You're much more likely to find solutions to whatever the problem is if you can find some common ground with whoever you're dealing with. And I see global citizenship requiring humility, the acceptance that there are other ways of doing things, and that just because someone else's way of doing things might make me a bit uncomfortable or uneasy, that doesn't mean it doesn't have as much merit as my own way of doing things. And meanwhile, beyond our school, global citizenship has become quite a political and controversial concept. In 2016, the UK Prime Minister at the time, Theresa May, declared that today too many people in positions of power behave as though they have more in common with international elites than with the people down the road, the people they employ, the people they pass in the street. But if you believe you're a citizen of the world, you're a citizen of nowhere. You don't understand what the very word citizenship means. And then in 2019, Donald Trump told the United Nations General Assembly that the future does not belong to the globalists. The future belongs to the patriots. I don't agree with these sentiments. I think the quotations that I've just mentioned were intended to stir up deeply unpleasant reactions among people. And I think that they also profoundly misunderstand what is meant by global citizenship. But I do understand that some people view talk of global citizenship as being naive at best and possibly much worse. And I think that's a challenge that's worth reflecting upon. Citizenship on a national level brings rights and protections and sometimes prestige. People go to great lengths to obtain or retain citizenship, sometimes risking or losing their lives in the attempt. It really is no game. For me, on the other hand, being a global citizen is a matter mostly of choice. If I choose to be, I can insulate myself against the negative impact of my decisions about what I consume, what I produce, what I do with my life. In global terms, it's a thoroughly privileged position when so many people in the world don't have much choice at all about how to be involved in the effects of other people's decisions. But it's also why it's so important that we don't simply focus on the rights and privileges that come from our claimed global citizenship. The right to travel where I like, behave in the way that I like, buy what I like, decide whether or not I feel like voting or taking part in other civic processes. The main reason I think global citizenship is so important is because of the need to focus on the responsibilities of citizenship. Our actions do affect others, economically, socially, in ways that can literally be about life and death when we consider climate change, the movement of people seeking asylum, the selling and subsidizing in a quite indiscriminate way of weapons, and in the treatment of global health problems. I think it's worth recognizing, in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, the main force behind the UN Declaration of Human Rights, that while every one of us cares more for his own country than for any other, the time has come when we must recognize that our devotion to our own land must never blind us to the good of all lands and of all peoples. But even aside from this most serious perspective, our global citizenship reminds us of the vibrancy and interest and sheer fun that comes through experiencing the diversity of our world. There's a lot that schools cannot do, but what we can do is help to open the eyes of our students to the delights of the world and spark their interest and feed their curiosity. We can provide opportunities and encouragement for them to grow in their capacity and experiences, to learn a language, to walk in someone else's shoes, to consider the impact of their actions. If they're going to have the privilege of travel, learn and prepare. There are really no excuses today for not doing one's homework into the language that will help communication, the do's and don'ts of local culture, dress, how to sit, how to use your hands, and so on. And above all, stay humble, especially when you're in someone else's space, because we all have so much to learn. And because we're stuck for now in our homes and our capacity to explore the world physically is so limited, I would encourage all of our young people, actually as head of school, I would require them to read books, watch programs about their world, listen to music from all over the world, and find out how to put their citizenship of this amazing world into action. That's all from me. I'm going to hand you back now, I think, to one of our helpers, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was very insightful. We have a couple of questions. So the first is, as an educator that's worked in different countries, have you found a difference in students' willingness to be global citizens?
What a great question. I don't really think so. I mean, I think it's certainly there are differences in terms of people's experiences. I've worked with students who have just amazingly rich experiences. The number of countries that people have lived in, and their knowledge about things is incredibly mature and rich. But you know, I think that sense of openness and curiosity that I referred to, I think you can find it anywhere. And sometimes it just needs that kind of, you know, that little spark to draw it out and have a good chat and experience things together.
Thank you. And we just have another question. What inspired you to introduce the GCD at ACS Hillingdon?
Well, to be honest, it was colleagues. I mean, I think they were, you know, I like to think that they were pushing at an open door, but as I mentioned earlier, we were looking for different ways whereby we could, I suppose, provide a kind of structure around students' broader learning, which is really important to us. We wanted something that wouldn't just focus on the academics, although of course those are the absolute core, but would also give a really high profile and an encouragement to students and a bit of a shape to that learning as well. I think in my experience, if you leave, it's very easy to leave these things up to chance in a school. And those students who do tend to do lots of things, and they hopefully they get a great deal out of it, while others who are not really that type of child, or maybe a little bit shyer, or just haven't yet discovered how interesting other things can be, tend to kind of hang back. And I think a structure like this really helps to kind of, you know, provide that impetus. So yeah, a couple of my close colleagues, Alyssa Ballard and Lisa Blair, were very forthright in bringing along this proposal. We looked at a couple of different options, and thankfully there was a great deal of support as well from the ACS International Schools organization.
Can we just have one final question? Do you think it's easier to inspire students to look at the world globally when they come from more educated households and households that they've perhaps lived in globally?
Sorry, can I just hear that first bit again? Is it easier, did you say?
Do you think it's easier to inspire students to look at the world globally when they come from educated households?
It certainly puts more in by way of resources into people's hands. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. But I mean, again, I think what you do with those resources is really the key. You don't need very many resources these days to be able to find out a great deal about the world. I think it really is more about willingness. And you know, if you are fortunate enough to have lots of those resources and lots of opportunities, I think all the more responsibility on you to actually use those well and you know, learn as much as you can. I think that would be a great shame to have all those resources and not use them.
Thank you very much, Martin. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. I'll just hand back off to you to close.
Oh, thanks so much. Just give me one second here. I just want to thank very much and once again our contributors this evening, Michael Sheldrick and Sarah Kebbell, and to the team behind the scenes here helping to manage all of this. And thank you too for listening in and for these great questions. If you'd like to continue the conversation or start another one or just find out more about our wonderful schools, please check our website, and you can also write to us too. You'll find an address there. So I think for now, I'm going to wish you a lovely evening and goodbye for now.